what if everything you've ever done, every choice, every breath, every heartbreak, wasn't real? Not in the dreamlike, we live in a simulation sense, but real only because someone else decided it should be. Because that's the spine of this thought experiment. It doesn't ask you to doubt the world. It asks you to doubt you, your decisions, your ethics, your pride in being a good person. It whispers, what if your morality was manufactured? What if you are only good because you've never been tested? What if, deep down, you're not who you think you are? That's the terror philosophers felt, because it's not about the world being fake. It's about your character being unproven. And there's one question that breaks the whole thing open. If no one was watching, who would you become? Let's begin. The silence of the switch. In 1967, philosopher Philippa Foot posed a scenario that became a legend, later refined by Judith Jarvis Thomson. The world calls it the trolley problem. You stand by a railway track. A trolley barrels forward, out of control. On the main track, 5 workers are tied up. They will die. But beside you is a lever. Pull it, and the trolley switches to another track, where 1 worker stands, 1 life to save 5. Would you pull the lever? Almost everyone says yes. It's painful, but 5 outweigh 1. It's simple math, a grim calculation. But now, let's change it. The stranger on the bridge. You're on a footbridge above the tracks. The trolley rushes below, again heading for 5 people. Beside you stands a large man. You could push him off the bridge. He would fall onto the tracks, stopping the trolley. He would die, but the 5 would live. Do you push him? This time, most people hesitate. Why so? Because now, you're not switching paths. You're using someone. You're doing harm to create good. It's no longer about the result. It's about what kind of person you are willing to become, to get it. And here begins the unraveling. The philosophy behind the panic. You've just stepped into the war between 2 ancient philosophies. Utilitarianism says, the right thing is what creates the most good for the most people. Deontology says, some actions are always wrong, no matter what they achieve. Saving 5 lives seems right, but pushing a person to their death, even for a noble reason, feels wrong. So where do you draw the line? How much morality is calculation? How much is instinct? And what if your instincts are built on illusions? The shadow you didn't know you had. Most people walk away from the trolley. Problem thinking, I'm a decent person. I'd do the right thing. But that's the trap. This experiment doesn't test your intelligence. It tests your comfort with moral violence. It shows that inside you, and me, is someone who can weigh a life, like currency. And once you see that shadow, you can't unsee it. Because if you would push someone to their death to save 5, what else are you capable of when the reasons feel noble enough? How many lines are you willing to cross? If the justification is strong, when logic fails, your soul. Philosophers didn't fear this thought experiment because it was violent. They feared it because it made the soul feel calculable. Because if your ethics depend on circumstance, on logic, on outcomes, then what are you? Just a moral machine? Just a pattern of equations pretending to be a person? What happens to compassion when it becomes a math problem? What happens to conscience when it bends to convenience? That's what terrified them. Not the decision, but the fact that you can justify anything if you're clever enough. Who are you without the rules? This experiment strips away everything you use to feel righteous. It doesn't matter how kind you've been, how spiritual, how generous. In the moment of the lever, in the moment of the push, the only thing left is your willingness to cause pain for the greater good. And that's where philosophers began to whisper something darker. Maybe morality isn't about being right at all. Maybe it's just a hierarchy of guilt, choosing the guilt you can live with. Do you carry the guilt of letting 5 people die, or the guilt of killing 1? What can your soul survive? That is your answer. This is why you're uncomfortable. If you felt unsettled, you're not alone. The trolley problem reveals the inner courtroom of your mind, the part of you always on trial. It asks, who do you become when there's no applause for doing the right thing? Would you be a savior, a coward, a killer, a justifier? Would you walk away, haunted? Would you sleep at night, or never again? That's why this thought experiment still shakes people. Because it doesn't show you the world. It shows you you. And it doesn't care what you say. It only listens to what you would do when the silence comes. But this is just the beginning. Because the trolley problem is only the first layer, there's another thought experiment, far more disturbing. One that asks you to look at every good thing you've done and wonder if it was ever about goodness at all. If you've been manipulated without knowing it. If your identity is the product of invisible choices you never made. And if so, then who's really pulling your lever? We'll dive into that. Now, the puppet you didn't know you were. They say you're free. You make choices. You believe in right and wrong. You love who you want. You live how you want. But here's the thought experiment that cracked that illusion. It doesn't ask if the world is real. It asks if you are. If your dreams are truly yours, or if they were planted, if your values were chosen, or programmed. This idea didn't come from science fiction. It came from the cold halls of academic philosophy. It's called the experience machine. And it doesn't terrify you because it's impossible. It terrifies you because, deep down, you know you might say yes. The machine that gives you everything. Imagine this. Scientists invent a perfect machine. You lie inside it, close your eyes, and for the rest of your life, you live a dream. A dream so vivid, so flawless. You believe it's real. You can be anyone. An artist, a genius, a world savior. Every pleasure, every victory, every love. And you will never know it was a machine. You'll never remember plugging in. To you, it will feel like life. Would you do it? Would you choose a perfect illusion over a messy, uncertain reality? Most people say no. But why? When philosopher Robert Nozick proposed this in 1974, he expected a split. But most people said, no. I'd never plug in. They claimed it wouldn't be real. I want truth, not fantasy. I want to do, not just feel like I'm doing. But here's the trap. You already live in illusions. You already chase feelings over facts. You already build a life based on what feels good, not what is true. So maybe the machine isn't far away. Maybe you're already in one, not built by wires, but by culture, by praise, by fear. The real machine is society. The machine isn't hidden in a lab. It's hidden in your childhood. You were told, be kind, be smart, be impressive, and people will love you. So you became what they needed. You built an identity around acceptance. You chased achievements. You played the hero. You smiled when you wanted to scream. And slowly, you forgot the switch was ever flipped. You began to believe that your desires were yours. But were they? Or were they the machine's code, written in applause? Your pain was the programming. The experience machine isn't about pleasure. It's about control. Because if someone knows what you fear and what you crave, they can write your whole life like a script. Think about it. You fear being useless, so you overwork. You fear being unlovable, so you overgive. You fear being seen as selfish, so you shrink. And the more you play these roles, the more people reward you. You're so helpful. You're such a hard worker. You're always there for others. But every compliment is a new wire. Every like is another simulation pulse. You feel good, but you're not free. You're trained. This is why the machine terrifies thinkers. It's not about sci-fi. It's about the sick realization that most people don't need to plug into a machine. They already have. Their job is the machine. Their relationship, their religion, their reputation. A carefully coded dream that says, if you keep playing the part, we'll keep giving you meaning. And what philosopher Nozick was really asking was this. If we offered you a life of truth, full of pain, loss, confusion, but real, would you choose it? Or would you stay in the comfort of the lie? This is why you still struggle. You say you want clarity, but clarity requires exiting the machine, and exiting means disappointing people, breaking patterns, losing roles, sitting with silence. That's why most never leave, because the machine gives you something precious, a role that's easy to play. It may not be joyful, but it's familiar. And in a world that constantly shakes you, familiarity feels like safety. But at what cost? What do you lose by being their version of you? Freedom isn't what you think. Here's the brutal irony. People think freedom is doing whatever you want. But if what you want was given to you by ads, teachers, wounds, trends, then how is that free? Maybe freedom isn't choice. Maybe freedom is the capacity to question your choices, to ask, why do I want this? Who benefits from me wanting it? What would I choose if no one was watching? The machine never wants you to ask those questions, because the moment you do, it starts to break. You don't have to escape. You have to wake up. Nozick never said the machine was evil. He just wanted you to notice how seductive it is. It gives you a beautiful story, but it steals your authorship. And you don't have to tear it down overnight. You just have to start noticing the difference between what soothes you and what frees you, between what earns applause and what earns peace, between what keeps you dreaming and what finally lets you live. But there's one more experiment. You've met the trolley. You've met the machine. Both terrifying. But there's one final thought experiment, the one philosophers whisper about in journals, but rarely teach, because it doesn't test your morality or your identity. It tests your very existence. It asks the most unthinkable question. What if everything, even your awareness, is just a loop, a repeating dream, forever echoing? And if that's true, then what is real? And more importantly, who's watching you from outside the dream? We'll go there. Now. The observer, behind the curtain. Every belief you have, every emotion that rises and falls, every identity you wear, like a name tag in this carnival of life. What if none of it is you? Not truly. Because here's the final thought experiment. And it doesn't ask what you would do. It asks what you are. It's called the phenomenal self model. And it's so unnerving that some philosophers warned it could trigger existential panic if taken too far. You ready? The illusion that lives like a person. Right now, you feel like you exist, right? A thinker, a chooser, a feeler. You don't just experience life. You believe you are the one experiencing it. But the phenomenal self model says that sense of being you is just a trick, not a soul, not a ghost, not even a consciousness, just a model, a simulation your brain creates to keep the body alive. It looks in the mirror and says, "Ah, yes, that's me." It hears thoughts and believes I'm thinking them. It feels pain and concludes, this is happening to me. But in reality, there is no you inside, just a storm of sensations running a script, a user interface, like a character on screen, believing it's real, while the code runs behind it. Why this shook the deepest thinkers. Most people fear death. But this thought experiment, it doesn't fear death. It questions whether life, as we know it, ever began. If there is no true self at the core, then who gets scared? Who falls in love? Who dreams? This is the part that terrifies not just thinkers, but monks, neuroscientists, and spiritual seekers alike. Because the more they try to find the I inside the body, the more it vanishes. They cut away the thoughts, the memories, the preferences, the reactions. And at the center, silence. Nothing but a space where you were supposed to be. You're the dream, not the dreamer. You don't dream dreams. You are the dream. That's what ancient mystics whispered. That's what philosophers like Thomas Metzinger dared to say. And that's what terrified even the most rational scientists. Because if your sense of self is just a model, then who, or what, is watching the model? Who sees the thoughts? Who notices the noticing? There must be an observer. But that observer has no voice, no gender, no memories. It just watches. It watches you laugh. It watches you cry. It watches you struggle to find yourself, while knowing there was never a self to find. But wait, isn't that depressing? You might think so. Most do, at first. The idea that you don't exist, that your name, your story, your struggles are just code passed down through genes and culture. Yes, it's scary. But then something strange happens. Once the panic fades, you feel lighter, like the weight you carried wasn't yours to begin with. Because if there's no you holding the pain, then maybe the pain was never personal. It was just passing through, like clouds across a sky that never moves. And for the first time, that sky becomes visible. The sky is the watcher. This is the secret. Mystics and philosophers share. They don't always say it with the same words. Some call it Brahman. Some call it the Tao. Some call it God. Others call it pure awareness. But they're all pointing to the same thing. There is no solid, separate self. There is only experience, happening. There's only presence, witnessing. And once you see this, not as an idea, but as a direct experience, you begin to live differently. Not like a person chasing a goal, but like a dance, happening through you. The trick is to stop clinging. You've spent your whole life trying to build a strong sense of self, to define yourself, to protect it, refine it, make it lovable, make it valuable. But maybe the real freedom is in letting it go, not in a reckless way, not to become nothing, but to realize that who you truly are was never the mask you built, and never the machine you obeyed. It was the space behind it all, the silence, watching the thoughts, the awareness, aware of itself. And that's the one thing the world can't manipulate, because it isn't a role, it isn't a feeling, it isn't even a thought. It's the silent trick that fixes everything you struggle with, because it reveals there was never anything broken, only misidentified. So now what? Now you wake up, slowly. Not by changing your job, not by moving cities, not by replacing thoughts, but by questioning, gently, each layer of illusion. You ask, whose desire is this? Whose fear is this? Who is the one noticing all of this? And in asking, you start to feel it, the freedom beneath the noise, not loud, not dramatic, just stillness, like a forgotten truth, remembered for the first time. The final thought. What if this whole time you were never the thinker, never the struggler, never the role, just the awareness, waiting patiently in the background for you to stop performing, stop pretending, stop identifying, and simply return. Not to a version of you, but to the watcher, the one who was always there, before thought, before memory, before the illusion of you. Welcome back.